Yes, you know what's coming.
She knows what's coming. Hey there, I'm author Sarah A. Chrisman.
And I'm Gabriel Chrisman.
And today we are going to talk about the importance of critical thinking. First of all, let's define what we mean by critical thinking.
Yeah, that term covers a wide range of meanings. So specifically, we especially mean the ability to have that sort of step back and think about things from a different perspective. And the ability to deconstruct what you're already thinking, find out maybe where those ideas and opinions come from, analyze your own biases.
Identify any logical fallacies, which is very important.
And be able to know when you need more information in order to make a decision.
When you put all that together, it counts as critical thinking. That's your kind.
And as a librarian and as someone who's now teaching some classes at college level, I've had to think a lot about this and try to come up with ways to get this across to people. That the most important thing that anyone needs to learn, whatever they're trying to learn at that moment, is how to learn.
Right. And a big part of finding answers with anything is learning how to ask the right questions. Because if you ask the right question, you're already 90% of the way towards your answer. And so that's very important. So as a librarian, how would you say, what would you say are the important aspects of asking good questions?
So good questions are specific. Good questions get at the root of what you're actually trying to find out. And so a lot of the time when people come in to ask a question at the library, we have something that's called the reference interview, which we go through to try to evince the right question, to get at the question they really want answered. Because a lot of the time they'll come in and they'll ask something that maybe it's related to it, but it doesn't get at the heart of what they actually need to know. So being able to specify what you actually need to know in any given circumstance.
And be very clear about it, whether you're asking a question of somebody else or just asking a question of yourself. You have to ask, okay, what do I really need to know? What are the specifics of the situation?
And this, when you're doing research, this equally is exactly the same. When you're trying to find something out, you have to really be able to specify, to know what are the words involved, how do you frame the question, what exactly is the issue here, and then what type of information, what type of answer do you need, or are you expecting?
And be careful about any logical fallacies you might fall into. Now, if you haven't studied rhetoric or logical fallacies, let's just go through a few of the common ones.
Some of the most common ones in America these days are the sunk cost fallacy.
Yes, the sunk cost fallacy is, I have expended this number of resources, this much money in X. And so I therefore have to continue with X ad infinitum till the end of my strength and the end of the world.
Because I've already invested too much to stop now.
Right. And you know what this always reminds me of, actually, is that wonderful old Kenny Rogers song, The Gambler.
Yes.
You got to know when to hold 'em, know when to fold 'em, know when to walk away, and know when to run.
Yes.
So sunk costs are all about knowing when to fold them, knowing when to walk away, and knowing when to run. These are important elements of living a worthwhile life.
Yes. And another one that's a common sort of logical fallacy is it's not really a fallacy, but the principle of ad hominem.
Right. Ad hominem is literally against the man. What that is when instead of arguing against an actual argument, someone starts arguing against the person. And
does that sound a little bit like U.S. politics today?
Oh yes, yes indeed.
Yes.
And that's when people are no longer actually debating a question, they're just throwing insults at each other. Wow, that is American politics.
It is.
All over.
Absolutely, yes. This is one that everyone needs to learn from.
Yeah. So the important thing about critical thinking is you avoid ad hominems because,
you realize
in the first place,
they don't get at the actual question.
Right. In the first place, they're not very nice, but more importantly, they don't get at the actual question. They don't help you solve anything.
Right.
And you can only answer questions when you're dealing with the question and not just throwing insults at the person. Now, a corollary to this is the idea of, okay, I belong to tribe X. Tribe X believes this, so I necessarily have to believe this. Now, that is a problem because you're not thinking for yourself.
And you're not thinking critically. You're just following along with someone else's agenda.
Right. And then the corollary to that is, okay, I belong to tribe X. Tribe Y thinks this, and so therefore, because I don't like tribe Y, I'm going to say whatever they say is just horrible. Now, the problem there is that sometimes, even a broken clock is right twice a day. It's the classic thing. Sometimes a person can say a whole host of things that you completely disagree with. It doesn't necessarily mean that if they also believe that 2 + 2 = 4, then you're going to start arguing that 2 + 2 does not equal 4, just because they said that. There might be one or two things within their argument that you have a really hard time disagreeing with.
Right.
And the fact that you don't like them doesn't necessarily mean that everything they say is bad.
But in America these days, it's too easy to fall into the black and white thinking that just, says that all of anything, must be one way or another. Right. And it doesn't involve critical thinking at that point. It doesn't involve actually going through and asking questions of each of these elements and trying to think for yourself about what makes sense, what you might need more information on before making a decision, or what might actually seem correct to you.
Right. So we've talked about how to avoid some of the traps. Now, how do we do productive things? How do we think productively, think critically?
Right. Well, again, to me, it all comes down to learning how to learn. That the most important thing to learn for yourself is how to answer those questions when they come up, because they will come up, whether you're being assigned a question at school or whether you actually run into a question in your own life. You're going to need answers to those questions. And being able to formulate those questions for yourself, think about how to find information to answer them, and then go through the process of trying to understand how you make those decisions, how you try to decide what's right, what's wrong for you especially. Those are things that are just the most important part of anyone's development, I think.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And they help you be a free and independent person, because in order to actually know what you yourself think about things, you have to think about them. You have to use your own brain. You can't just follow the herd. And you can't just go along with what everyone else says and follow blindly.
Right.
That's where you get into trouble.
Yes, absolutely. And, a lot of the time, one of the challenges to this in American culture is that arguments are presented without giving you enough information. They don't give you how these people came to these decisions, how they came to these policies. Right. They don't explain, basically they don't show their work.
Well,
and then it makes it harder to take it apart and understand for yourself whether you agree with it or not.
And a lot of the time that's deliberate.
Correct.
Because if you look throughout history and throughout the way that people interact with each other and the group dynamics of humans as a species, a lot of manipulation happens within human groups when certain people decide to very carefully craft logical fallacies, very carefully distract people from thinking critically. Yes. They encourage people to just follow the herd because that leads to a lot of power for certain groups.
Yes.
And that's why if you want to control your own destiny, you have to be very wary of that and think critically for yourself.
Yes, and the ability to do that then really does protect you from being controlled or dominated by these sort of power groups that are just wanting to recruit you to be yet another follower.
Right.
And what we need more than anything are not followers, but people who actually are independent individuals.
Right. And part of how you can do all that and serve yourself instead of just serving other people is to stay as informed as you possibly can. And that means reading books.
Yes, it does. And it means reading all sorts of information and knowing how to find information for yourself.
Right.
And not just take whatever appears on a feed.
Right. And when you read books, you can find out what traps people have fallen into in the past, both in terms of logical fallacies and in terms of propaganda and group dynamics and the way that people have been manipulated at various times through history.
It lets you see the patterns, and
Right.
there are patterns.
Right. And once you can identify the patterns, you can learn how to work within them and avoid the ones that you don't want to get sucked into. And so, I hope that's been helpful for you today, and I hope you'll go out and read lots of books.
And think for yourself.
And think for yourself. Thank you for watching today. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a nice thumbs up, and remember to tell your friends about my books. Happy reading!